40 years been drovin', no woman by my side, no one gives me orders on this dusty road I ride. But the flies can drive you crazy and the wind can get you down, but you won't find me lingering or hanging around this town. Channel country, Gibber plains, tablelands I know, and then there's gentle sand dunes where little mallees grow. There's a friendly campfire everywhere I go. I'll play another drovin' song the white owl wouldn't know. So see you later, Birdsville, you're far too flash for me. While the beer was cold and yummy, from here it's Billy T. The mob is keen on moving, and that sounds good to me. Good feed, they reckon, southbound. We're heading for Maree. Chapter 27. See you later, Birdsville, you're far too flash for me. In 2002, Australia embraced the year of the Outback. The first Great Australian Outback Cattle Drive was held that year as part of the celebrations. Birdsville, I reckon, is the Alice Springs of Queensland. It's part of the legend of the heart of Australia. The Birdsville track is probably even more famous, the road between Birdsville and Maree in South Australia. The 517-kilometre track is famous for the legend of driving cattle north to south and south to north, depending on the availability of grass. In fact, it was the celebration of driving cattle over that track that brought me to Birdsville in the first place. I was asked to perform on the back of a semi-trailer with Warren H. Williams on the evening before the cattle drive left. As we flew from Sydney in a light aircraft over the desert country, I could feel a song coming into my head. Not long before this, I had been on a trip in northwest New South Wales supporting the push to save stock routes through the state. They were under pressure to be sold off to farmers and graziers. My support was for the stock routes to be kept, as they also provided corridors for wildlife and native plant stock through the state. On that trip, I met a traditional sheep drover with his caravan and dogs. He told me he had never married and it suited him fine to be his own boss. He enjoyed his independence. With this in mind, I started writing the song Skinny Dingoes in my head on the aircraft. By the time I landed in Birdsville, I thought the drover in Skinny Dingoes should be on the legendary Birdsville track. I made a point of meeting Eric Oldfield, who was there to lead the tourist cattle drive along with his experienced mates. Eric had been the boss drover for the final cattle drive in 1972, before road trains took over the job of traditional droving. He knew the Birdsville track like the back of his hand. I met Eric and his wife when I was doing a sound check and settling into the motel at Birdsville pub. That brief moment was enough to ask him about the topography of the track. He rattled it off: treeless gibber plains, channel country with coolabahs, and sand dunes with mallee trees. It was enough for me to finish the song. So that evening I sang Skinny Dingoes for the audience. I don't think I've ever written a song and performed it publicly the same day before or since. It went over like a charm, perfect for the occasion. After I sang the song, Eric Oldfield passed the stage stumbling a little, saying, "That was a bloody good song, John." Right behind him was his wife saying, "Where you going, Eric?" When the show was over, I was very keen to have a yarn with Eric. A few inquiries later, I found him over behind one of the cattle trucks. He was sitting on a 44-gallon drum, enjoying a few beers with his droving mates. I said to Eric, "You look like you've been having a good time, mate." "Yeah," he said, "I'd be having an even better time if old Handbrake wasn't following me around." I wondered how he'd be the next day in control of the cattle. Apparently he was fine. I guess he was toughened to it. That day was a joy. There was a parade of the real stockmen on their horses, all of them keen to represent the legend of the Birdsville track. It was such a memorable moment. This was no Clint Eastwood movie. These men and horses were indeed magnificent and proud, and I felt extremely proud too. Skinny Dingoes was released on the Chandelier of Stars album in 2005, along with Keeper of the Stones, about Warren, and The Camel Boy, my tribute to the great artist and Warren's great-uncle, Albert Namatjira. The album picked up another 3 golden guitars to add to my mantelpiece. On my second visit to Birdsville, I had a chance to sit on the edge of its famous Diamantina River and admire the wonderful bird life. I also had another chance to wander over the Gibber Plain and discover amazing shiny baked red stones, all in shapes and sizes. If I lived there, I'd make use of those stones for sure. There are so many artistic resources in the outback, like the rock-hard hollow logs of Coolabah. These could be sanded down and would make beautiful pots. All that's needed is time for contemplation to let the imagination take over. Well, here I am on the city street dancing to fashion drums and rushing feet, drowning in a freeway stream stuck inside my four-wheel dream. Now, I know you like the comfort zone, woman. Don't want to leave you all alone, picking out on chocolate frogs, paying bills and walking dogs, checking out the butcher's bum, listening to my nagging mum. Oh, I got to cross that Anzac Bridge, climb the Great Dividing Ridge, roll out through the wheat and sheep, way out where a man can sleep, underneath the chandelier of stars. We can fly for hours and hours, laid out on the jolly swag. It's free. Come with me, woman. Come with me, woman. Out into the big red, out into the big red, out into the big red. The best Australiana museum I've ever seen was in Birdsville. The large shed was open at this time. It would be impossible to estimate the value of the collection. Enamel signs, farm implements, toys, posters. I was in awe the entire time I was there, as I'm a bit of a collector myself. Sadly, the next time I was in Birdsville, I learned that John Menzies, the owner, had been trying to sell the museum and its contents as a single purchase for 4 years, but had no takers. So in 2011, he simply shut the doors and took everything away to be auctioned, so I'm told. I wish I'd known about it. I thought the museum was a huge tourist attraction for the small town that has a population a little over 100 people. My most recent visit to Birdsville was in July 2013 for a marathon event called the Big Red Run to raise money for type 1 diabetes. It was a coincidence that my latest album was called The Big Red, a name I used to relate generally to the Red Outback. I guess that was the trigger for the organisers to ask me to put on a concert on top of Birdsville's Big Red, the massive 40-metre mountain of red sand dune, 30 kilometres west of the town. On the drive out to the sand dune, several police vehicles were stopping the stream of cars heading for the sand dune. Out came the breathalyzers. Some of the cops had come all the way from Mount Isa, more than 700 kilometres away, as the local Birdsville police station is a one-man show. The breathalyzers were a warning to people of the police presence and of the perils of drink driving. The boys in blue enjoyed a free show on the dune and were among the many fans who wanted a photo with me afterwards. They weren't breathalyzing people after the show, which showed good judgment on their part, I thought. It was a family day out, not a rock concert. The sand dune overlooks a salt lake surrounded by swampland covered in dead coolabah trees. It reminded me of what inspired my song, Galleries of Pink Galahs, as several of the dead trees that day were completely covered in white, like almond trees covered in blossom, and others in pink. There were no flowers, the trees were covered with corellas and galahs. What a sight this was from high above. My guitarist, Col Watson, and I were driven up the sand dune with our guitars for a sound check about an hour before the show was to commence at sunset. The crew had painstakingly set up a stage on top of the dune. It had never been attempted before, even though it was an ideal amphitheatre. Already there were hundreds of people settling in and snuggling up in readiness for a cool, breezy evening. Families had come from all over Australia to be there. It was a delight to perform my songs for them in such an iconic setting. After all, they were all campers and travellers and completely in tune with the songs I sang, songs that really come alive in that setting. It felt like the songs belonged there. Heath Moore, my lighting technician, had cleverly lit up the crest of the sand dune behind the stage. He could make it blue, green, red. You can imagine how magic that looked as I sang my Outback songs, opening up with my anthem, Island of Oceans, followed by Skinny Dingoes, The Big Red, Red Gum's Diamantina Drover. I wish I'd written that one. The audience was ours for over 2 hours. They still wanted more despite the fact that the desert temperature was decreasing rapidly as it grew darker. It was an unforgettable night, and I'm honoured to have been the first person to put on such a concert on the Big Red. Afterwards, the cops invited us for a drink around the fire behind the courthouse back in town. Years ago, I accepted a similar offer in Mount Isa and had to sing True Blue for them, of course. They reminded me of this night and reckon there's still a photo in their underground clubhouse from that evening. I told them I'd consider their invitation, but we ended up not going. I didn't want to finish up the same way as I did the last time in Mount Isa, that is, 3 sheets to the wind. We had 12 hours of flying ahead of us the following day. In fact, by the time we landed in Sydney, we had visited 7 airports: Birdsville, Windora, Quilpie, Charleville, Toowoomba, Brisbane, and finally Sydney. In Sydney the next day, no wonder I felt knackered and needed a nana nap before singing True Blue at a function for Steve Waugh at his foundation's charity event.